Kansas City Sports Update Studios. Welcome to Kingdom Radio, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. Brought to you by Arrowhead-update. Join Chris and Richard on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Player FM, CastBox, and all third-party applications. Check us out on Facebook platforms such as Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead-update. And if you cannot find us there, Google or search Kingdom Radio and Kansas City Chiefs, and you will find us. Welcome to the Kingdom.
How are we doing, Chiefs Kingdom? It is Thursday, August 1st, and with me tonight, for the first time in a while, we have our senior NFL analyst, kris-chavez, with us this evening. How are we doing, Chris? It's been a while. I'm really happy to have you back on.
I'm glad to be back. It has been a while. I feel like I haven't talked to you in a couple of weeks, man.
Yeah, it's been quite an eventful summer for both of us, and there's a lot to talk about here tonight on Kingdom Radio. And my name is Richard, if you all have not listened to the show before, and I should probably introduce myself a little bit more, but we're going to jump right into things tonight. And the big topic for Kansas City and training camp here in the last couple of days is Tremon Smith being moved from defensive back to running back. And my question to you, Chris, is this Andy Reid's flex experiment?
I think it kind of has to be. He's looking to see who can do what, and with the speed that Tremon Smith brings to the table at 4.3, 240, you kind of have to try to utilize that anywhere that you can. And Andy Reid last year had been throwing around the idea of moving him to the offense because of his ability on the kick returns.
Yes.
And excuse me. The ability or the threat that his speed brings when you throw Tyreek on the field, Sammy Watkins on the field, Hardman on the field, and we'll say Darrell Williams on the field. You throw those guys on the field and Tremon Smith, that's going to be a defensive coordinator's nightmare.
Absolutely.
And even if it's good for like 2 or 3 plays in the entire game, that's going to terrify players.
Yes, and I guess I have another question for you, and this is hypothetically speaking. Would you think that Tremon Smith could be the version of Dexter McCluster that Kansas City hoped that he would be?
I think that he's going to be a different dynamic because Tremon Smith is a little bit taller. And
right.
McCluster was going to be more of like the Edelman mold that New England incorporated.
Yes, and this is true. And to touch base on the value that Smith had with our team last year in special teams, we're talking about a rookie who was second-team All-Pro in special teams and who had a 97-yard kick return last season. Unfortunately, he didn't get into the end zone. But this is also a guy who started 2 years in high school as a quarterback and also went all-state as a quarterback as well, one of those 2 seasons. This is a guy with a lot of talent here, and I kind of stubbed him a little bit at the end of last season and said he really didn't do the things that we'd hoped for here in Kansas City. And, with his kick return game, I've kind of put my foot in my mouth. But what can we expect from this scenario, or are we just going to rely more on him, for special teams? Do you think this is going to stick here on the offensive side of the ball?
It's really going to depend on how much he develops in the 3 weeks, really, going into the regular season. We probably only have one questionable roster spot at running back. And I don't see Tremon Smith necessarily taking that right away just by making the switch over. He's got a lot to show. He's going to be going up against guys who played 4 or 5 years in college at the running back position. They're going to be much more skilled and developed at that position. I think Tremon Smith is probably going to be maybe might be a two-way player. I can't remember the guy's name, but he did it for New England, where he would step in on occasion and play wide receiver. Tremon Smith could potentially be that guy for us, where he steps in at cornerback, at safety in a pinch. He can come in and play a few gimmick plays on offense with running the ball, possibly even throwing the ball, which would add a whole nother dynamic as well.
Right.
Especially when you throw in the, and I can't remember his name, the tight end that we're looking at, who's the converted quarterback. Let's say that we have those two guys, plus Mahomes on the field at any given time. That's three guys who could potentially throw the ball.
Yes, and you're right about that. And I hear, was that Nick Keiser that you were talking about, the tight end that we got from, what was that, Princeton?
Yeah, the Princeton quarterback, yeah.
Yes, and so it's the versatility here that we have. And I think the most interesting thing about this move for me is how short we are at the cornerback position and how deep we are at the running back position. I think that's what makes Andy Reid's decision, special, is there's more behind it, because the way the depth chart adds up, I mean, something has taken place that, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless there's a dynamic aspect that he's adding to the offense immediately.
Yeah, and the other thing also to kind of to touch on what you were just talking about, the other thing to throw in there as well is the injury to Reiser, who was potentially going to be our fourth cornerback. So we got a little bit more depleted at cornerback there, and then you take away a potential cornerback player to make it even more shallow of a talent pool, so to speak. I think that we have more, or the coaches have more faith in the talent that we have on the roster that maybe even we as the fans see.
Right, and it's no secret that there's something special going on with the defense, which we'll get into that here a little bit later in the show. But I guess what this all boils down to in the end is, did Andy make the right decision on this move? And that's yet to be seen, and I really look forward to that, because it's like you were saying, it's going to add a dynamic to our offense that I don't think we have seen yet. So is there anything else you'd like to add on Smith before we move on?
I just have a quick question for you on that topic. Do you think we'll see Smith at running back in our first preseason game?
Yes, and that was my big question as well, and I'm glad that you asked that, and I believe that we will. I feel like, like I said, that's such a bold move that you need to exploit that and get as many reps in as possible to get this man ready for the regular season. So I think that a preseason game for him is a good fit to try to, fit this man into the mold that's, really already been created.
Yeah, I think that with the amount of reps that he needs, and as many as we need to see him get, so that we can make a good determination whether this is a good or a bad move, I think we could see him getting all of the fourth quarter and potentially even some touches in the third quarter at running back.
Yes, and this is also a backfield that is yet to prove itself throughout a full season, so it really is wide open. So I like what Coach Reid is doing. I feel like that's a bold move, but a good move, because he knows what direction he wants to go. And if this works, I mean, hey, this was the best thing that the Chiefs could have done on offense on the offseason outside of McCall Hardman.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, with that being said, we are going to move on here.
This is the No Look Pass, brought to you by Sean and Keogh Music Solutions, providing everything from simple background audio to complex creative audio pieces. Bring your project to life with Sean and Keogh Music Solutions.
All right, this is the No Look Pass brought to you by Sean Akio Music Solutions. This is where Chris and I ask each other a question that is not scripted, so we test each other's football knowledge and welcome you to pick our brain. So I'm going to start off tonight with a No Look Pass to Chris, and my question to you is how many AFL championships have the Chiefs won? And this is the championship game, before the Super Bowl era.
I know we had. I'm going to go with 3.
Final answer?
Final answer.
You are correct, sir. It is 3 championships that we have won, 1 Super Bowl and 2 Super Bowl appearances. Nice one. Hey, that's a nice one. I believe that's the first one that either of us have gotten right. Good job there, Chris.
Thank you. All right, so I've got a good hard one for you.
Okay.
Okay, so in any given season, which of our rivals do you most enjoy playing against?
Ooh, in any given season, what is my favorite rival of ours to play against? Gosh, there's a lot of good rivalries out there. But I must say, the one that makes me the one I enjoy the most, but also makes me the most nervous every time we go there or they come here, however it works, I'd have to say the Pittsburgh Steelers. It seems to be a matchup that's always comparable, and I can't say it's always a close game, but we don't play each other that much. We had a nice little run here the last few years, but outside of the AFC West, that's really the one that I enjoy. What about you, though?
There's a lot of reasons why I'm going to go with this team, but I have to go with the Denver Broncos.
Right.
Because of the location where I'm at, I have to deal with a lot of Bronco fans, and so there's always a lot of good ribbing going on the entire week that we play them and the week afterwards. The entire season is just more fun when the Broncos are decent or even relevant.
Right.
Even if they're playing awfully. Think back to the season where they had Tim Tebow as the starting quarterback.
Yeah, yes, and that was a great season for them.
They were awful, but they played us extremely well and ended up beating us.
Right.
The dude completed, 2 passes the entire game. But anyways, it's always just more fun when they're good.
And I agree with that. That I guess that would be my pick outside the division. If I took a divisional opponent, it absolutely would be the Denver Broncos, because everything that is Mile High Stadium and everything that is John Elway and Derek Thomas, that whole era, it's always been something special against the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos. And, I don't really think that there's a wrong answer here. It just depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. But I couldn't agree more with your pick as well. I just really enjoyed the Pittsburgh-Kansas City game. It's kind of turned into a rivalry of sorts, but I'd like to see it continue, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, they're, for the most part, recently, they've been very competitive. For the most part. There have been 1 or 2 blowouts, but it's been really competitive.
Yes. Okay. So, that is the No Look Pass segment. We're going to move on to our third segment here in the broadcast tonight, and that is, we're going to talk about the defensive buzz at training camp, matching the offensive buzz from the prior season. And I'm going to start off with, my big player that I think deserves the spotlight tonight, and that's Juan Thornhill. And we're talking about a guy who's already picked off Mahomes or Henney or whichever quarterback it was 2 to 3 times, and is really challenging Mahomes on a lot of plays. So let's talk about this defensive buzz, Chris, and we'll start off with Juan Thornhill. What's your take on Juan, and let's talk about this buzz that's going around Chiefs Kingdom.
So to start with Juan, he's doing everything that you would expect out of a veteran as a rookie.
Right.
Now, he's not necessarily like a leader on the defense, but he's doing everything that is expected of him. He's working with and talking to Honey Badger or with his coaches to try to understand exactly where everyone should be, where he needs to be, and he's just developing. He's making mistakes every once in a while, but he's learning from them. And as Kendall Fuller has said to the press, everybody is holding each other accountable to not make the same mistake twice.
Right.
And that doubly goes for the rookies who are going to be seeing major time. Thornhill's going to be that guy.
Yes, and I think that structure was lacking under a Bob Sutton defense, and Thornhill really came in at a perfect time to thrive under a Steve Spagnuolo defense compared to that defensive scheme we ran previously.
No, absolutely. And plus, he can also learn from Honey Badger. I think if we had gotten Thornhill last year, hypothetically speaking, for him to be able to learn under Barry would have been fantastic as well.
Yes.
It's just that lacking the coaching aspect there from Sutton would have been a little bit of a deterrent to his development.
Yes, and I agree with you. And let's talk about the Honey Badger here a little bit, because here's the biggest thing, and I think that the Honey Badger acquisition was the biggest piece to the Kansas City Chiefs puzzle, because he has already made his presence known as the leader of that defense. He's extremely vocal, and I watched a little clip of the Honey Badger. They had him mic'd up, and he told Juan Thornhill to just be himself. Play like you play, and do the things that make you who you are. And so the Honey Badgers really stepped into that role, and I think that it's a big deal for Kansas City to transition from Eric Berry to Mathau. And so what do you think about that? What do you think about the Honey Badger and what he brings and the dynamic that he's brought to our defense?
I think that I'm just going to kind of jump ahead a little bit, but he and Frank Clark
Yes.
Bring the leadership to this team and this is no knock against the guys that we lost this offseason at all. I have tremendous respect for them. But they bring a leadership to this team that we lacked, and they bring a swagger.
Yes.
And an energy as well. Nothing against Houston, but he was just aging, and it was really hard for him to really back up all the talk that he had.
Right.
He couldn't do the things that he once was able to do, and bless him, and hopefully he can get signed somewhere, but he couldn't do it for us last year.
No. And it was time for a transition, and it's one of those things that this whole scheme that's brought in, all of these players, the players are sold on Spags and his coaching scheme, and what they said they love the most about him as a person is he has his own way about it, and what's the right word I'm looking? The approach that he takes towards each player, he really singles them out, but in a good way. And I think that's a huge difference between the defense that we have been used to watching the last 3 seasons to now, is we have a coach who is in your face. When was the last time we had a defensive coach that was in your face? Was that? Go ahead.
It had to be a long time before Sutton.
Yeah, and was Edwards ever a defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, or was he just a head coach, Herm Edwards?
I think he was just the head coach.
And see that, I wish Herm Edwards could have been the defensive coordinator instead of the head coach, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, so Keath-Reiser, he tore his Achilles. How big of an impact does that have on our defensive secondary. And Chris, I'm also going to ask you, this will be kind of a double question here, is what is your take on our defensive secondary as a whole?
So losing Reiser doesn't affect our top three. I think that our top three cornerbacks was solidified well before the season started with Breland, with Fuller, and with Ward. And what his injury does is it opens things up for the younger, inexperienced talent to A, make a roster spot, B, show what they can do. And I don't mean for this to sound really callous, but in a good way, it's going to be a good thing for us that Reiser got injured, in that we have some really good talent at cornerback that we're probably going to have to cut and other teams are going to pick up. Am I going to say that we're going to have a guy who's going to come in and who is an undrafted free agent or a 6th-round pick who's going to light up the entire NFL and end up becoming a number one corner? I don't think so.
Right.
But I think that somewhere down the road, these guys are going to end up being a starter for us. And keeping them on the roster and for them to be able to see the field more is going to just contribute to their development. But in the short term, looking especially for this season, making a Super Bowl run, I would like to have a little bit more experience there.
Yes, and I would like to say as well, Mark Fields has shown some promise as well as Rashad Fenton. So it's nice to see some of this depth that we have and the talent that we have. They're just they're not really getting talked about much because I feel like I'm with you. I feel like Breland, Fuller, and Ward is a pretty good lineup there for our defensive secondary, especially with the two they have backing them up. I mean, they should never, ever be left on an island.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
So, with that being said, I feel like our defense will be a way faster defense than the previous years. They're going to play a lot smarter. They're honed in on their job and exactly what they're supposed to do on each play, because this is a complex system that they're in, and the more they know, the more they will confuse the offense. And I think that we have the pieces here, like we spoke before, to be a top 10 defense, and it's looking more promising as training camp goes along.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in one other thing. Another surprise at defense, or on defense, is the emergence of Demontre Ward. I think of his name, the cornerback who ended up stepping in for Rashad Breland when he went down, I think it was on Monday, with a cut thumb. He's come in, he's impressed, and what I've heard about him is that he's not built like a cornerback, he's built like a running back.
Right. And
that, to me, what I hear is that this guy can lay some wood and put out some pretty big hits. And he's speedy and quick.
Yes, and he's really another player that I feel like can flourish in the system that we're in. And I think that's the biggest key to our defense, is we're a system defense, and where we where we lack will be picked up by other positions on the field. So I'm not really too concerned about where we lie, especially with the Keath-Reiser Achilles tear. I think we're in good shape, and it really sounds like you're on board with me as well, Chris.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Okay, so with that being said, we're going to move on from this defensive segment, and we're going to touch base a little bit on the NFL Top 100 list, because we had 6 players from the Kansas City Chiefs on this list. Unfortunately, Patrick-Mahomes was not number 1, but where did he fall, Chris? Where did Patrick-Mahomes end up at?
El número cuatro, number 4.
Number 4. And let me ask you this. Do you think that was a fair placement for a first-year starter on the 50 touchdowns, 5,000-yard list MVP, Pro Bowl MVP, the ESPY's NFL Player of the Year. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Do you think that was a good spot for Patrick Mahomes to land first-year starter?
Okay, so I have to be honest here. And
please do.
With it depends on how the list is being put together. If you're looking strictly at year by year, then number 4 overall is not a good placement.
Right.
It should have been much higher.
Yes.
If you're looking at all of the year combined, I think that they overplaced him. Because there are other players in the league right now who have had much more success over the years of their career. And I just don't know how that information is taken into consideration when they're putting together that list. So it's hard for me to really say whether it truly was a good placement or not. If it was strictly on what was done last year, he got misplaced.
Right. And my thing about it is, when I think of the name and I think of what the significance is of year to year making this list, it is the NFL top 100 players of 2018. So to me, I feel like that specifies that's a yearly award that there shouldn't be any magnitude as far as the progression or depth of your career and or success. I feel like it should be narrowed down to a year by year. And if it is that way, then Patrick Mahomes should be number 1 and not Aaron Donald.
Absolutely. And I have to agree with you on that. The only other player that I could potentially have seen making just as big of an impact on their team as well as the record book was Khalil Mack.
Yes.
And I could see an argument for Khalil Mack being 1, Pat Mahomes being 2. I could see it. But Aaron Donald being ahead of him, Drew Brees being ahead of him, right. I can't agree with that.
Me either. And especially when Mahomes won the MVP award over Drew Brees. But also, this is one thing I take in consideration with Drew Brees. Drew Brees broke the record for the most passing yards in NFL history this prior season as well. So that's something that has to be taken into consideration.
Well, yes, but then that also brings in the question of, is this list going over the entire player's career?
Right. And so it's that fine line that's this kind of, which way do you go with it? Do you have to be biased one way? Do you feel like that there's a balance? And if it is a balance, then maybe this list is right. Maybe this is the only way to make this right without being any way biased. So let's touch base on some of the other Kansas City Chiefs, because what my biggest thing that I really enjoyed seeing here in Chiefs Kingdom was we had 3 players in the top 25 of the top 100 NFL players of 2018, and that's something to be proud of, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
I mean, 3 players. We had Tyreek Hill at number 19, which, in my mind, I think that was also a little underrated, but I'm not unhappy with his placement. Top 20, that's not bad.
Oh, no, absolutely. I would like to see the list, just because I've been doing so much other stuff. I haven't seen the entire list. I like to see what wide receivers were listed ahead of him.
I believe there was only 2 receivers listed ahead of him, and I cannot remember which ones they were. But it's still, I really enjoyed seeing him at 19, especially with everything that's been going on. I know that doesn't matter for this list, and you're voted by the peers, but 19. I mean, heck, before. The last 5 seasons, when do we even see a player on the top 50 list for, the Chiefs? So then we talk about Travis Kelce at 21, topped all tight ends, highest ranked tight end. I would say that he absolutely deserved that rank, and I'm not mad about 21. You feel like that's a fair rank for Kelce?
Very much so, especially for a tight end. The tight end in this day and age is a very undervalued position,
Right.
And for Kelsey to be able to get that high as a tight end is pretty incredible. I'm sure that Gronk in the past has been up around that same level as well. And so for Kelsey to dethrone Gronk, so to speak, is a very huge testament to what he did last year.
Right. And it's nice to see, Travis Kelce get recognized for all of his hard work, because he is a monster. And I think it's no secret in the NFL that Travis Kelce is the best tight end. Chris Jones came in at 36. I actually got pretty excited about that number, because that's a high number for a defensive end to pull, or defensive lineman to pull on the top 100 list. Is he deserving a 36? What do you think about that?
I love what he did last year with, I think it was 10 sacks or 10 games with a sack streak.
Yes.
That was incredible and very under talked about outside of Kansas City.
Right.
And do I think that necessarily justifies where he's at? No.
Right.
I think that's a little bit high. Maybe somewhere in like the 50s range, but I think that 36 is probably going to be where he's going to end up this year. I think he's going to make a tremendous jump in with this defense, and his impact, and we're going to see it so much more in every game. It's going to be incredible.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch for sure, and I look for Frank Clark to jump up this list a little bit as well. He fell in at 85th on the list, and it's we kind of flop players here because Dee Ford is also on the list, and he's obviously moved on, and so Frank Clark kind of replaced that void in the top 100 for the Chiefs. But Frank Clark, I think 85 is a little bit underrated. I think personally, Frank Clark is going to have the season of his career this coming up season. What's your take on Frank?
I have to agree. 85 is extremely low. I think that he was probably undermarketed out in Seattle. And I think with his move to Kansas City, again, his profile is just going to blow up in the defense.
Yep, and it's, obviously defensive ends have moved way up the list on the top 100. Obviously, one is topping the list, and Frank Clark is going to make his way up that list as well. And a guy that I really love to see, and I want to put this out there, he is an anchor on our offensive line and a terror across the NFL. And we're talking about a man who truly has Von Miller's number, a sack master for years and years and years. Mitchell Schwartz came in at 94, and I love to see that man get credit because he really, really protects, Mahomes' weak side, and so it's nice to see him get recognition.
No, absolutely, and that's what he was brought in to do, was to solidify that offensive line and opposite of Fisher, and he has done just that, and he's been worth every single penny and then some.
He really has.
And for him to make that list as a right tackle is incredible. And you watch what this guy does week in, week out against some of the best pass rushers, and he essentially shuts them down like Von Miller, absolutely makes them disappear out of games for entire quarters, if not halves. And it's incredible to watch him play. And I think a lot of Mahomes' success last year is due to the fact that Schwartz kept him clean 90% of the time.
Yes, and it's extreme value for Patrick Mahomes to be able to stand there in the pocket and not worry about anybody, coming from the right side. He can leave his shoulder open. He really doesn't have to step up into the pocket that much. It's just a perfect scenario for a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, and really Mitchell Schwartz, you really deserve your credit because you are, by far one of the best right tackles the Kansas City Chiefs have ever had. So that is the top 100 list for the Kansas City Chiefs. We touched base on Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, Frank Clark, and Mitchell Schwartz. And I want to recognize one more player who's getting ready to be recognized this coming up weekend or the following weekend. I'm not really sure when the induction ceremony is for NFL Hall of Fame, but we do have Tony-Gonzalas going into the Hall of Fame for the Kansas City Chiefs. There's also a cornerback from the Kansas City Chiefs, and he is slipping my mind. I don't know if you can help me with that, Chris, because there are two Kansas City Chiefs going into the Hall of Fame this season.
Well, off the top of my head, I'm not too sure.
Well, what do you think about Tony-Gonzalas here and his impact on the Chiefs, and is he well deserving of a first ballot Hall of Fame? I personally think so. He was the one who really set the pace and the tone for what we call tight ends today. But kind of take off on Tony-Gonzalas. What was his impact on the league?
I don't want to say flipped the NFL on its head, but he definitely impacted the league, not only the Chiefs, but the league, and really opened the doors for the Antonio Gates, the Gronkowskis, the Travis Kelces. A lot of these tight ends who are basketball converts, who are fast, big, can jump out of the freaking stadium and catch the ball. And it's the little things from basketball that translate so well into the tight end position. Being able to box out and shield your defender and still reach out and grab that ball. And I know that there were other tight ends prior to Gonzalez who were of the same mold, but Gonzalez was certainly the most successful in doing so.
Yes, I would have to say so. And we're talking about a man who leads all tight ends for receptions and yardage. And that's a feat in itself. And our other player that is going into the Hall of Fame for the Kansas City Chiefs is Johnny Robinson, a late cornerback for the Kansas City Chiefs that I believe was in the Super Bowl era. And it took him a long time to get into the Hall of Fame, but I'd like to give him his credit as well. But Tony Gonzalez, yes, that man, catalyst. He really, really paved the way for tight ends. And, you noted a bunch of credible assets on Tony Gonzalez's career and the impact that he had. So congratulations, Tony. We're happy for you. But, hey, we're in a new era of football here in Chiefs Kingdom. And we actually are going to move into the season preview, and we are in Week 15 coming up on the playoffs. And we have the Denver Broncos at Arrowhead, a December 29th game at 1 p.m. And just to refresh everybody's memory, the Chiefs are dominant in December. And so I guess my question to you, Chris, is this a game where the Denver Broncos are a bubble team, or are they spoilers? Where are we stacking up? Because between me and you, throughout this process of the season preview, we have the Chiefs stacked up, both of us, at 13-1 coming into this game.
I think that this game is definitely a bubble game. I mean, like I said earlier, the Broncos always play us tough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what's really going to determine the outcome of this game is who's the quarterback. And right now, Joe Flacco is expected to be the quarterback for the Denver Broncos. And if he's the quarterback, and still is at this point in the season, it probably means that they've been doing really good and are currently winning, or at least being successful enough that they're probably a playoff team.
Right.
If they are out of the playoff picture, I expect for them to have Drew Lock as their starter at this point. If Drew Lock is the quarterback, I don't want to necessarily say that it's a lock-in game for us, but I definitely feel much more confident going into the game with Locke as the quarterback.
And I could understand that because Joe Flacco brings a certain amount of leadership to the team, as well as the leadership that's really, Emmanuel Sanders obviously is the leader of their wide receiver group. But I think that it's essential for the Denver Broncos' success for Flacco to have a career year. And we also know that Denver plays Kansas City well every time we match up. Their defense always shows up against the Chiefs. But here's my thing. Denver hasn't put up points against Kansas City in the last 4 to 5 seasons, and we have an even better defense coming into this. And even if the Broncos' offense steps up, we stepped up our defense enough to I feel like we're going to even that out. And I don't think that the defense on the Broncos side will be able to stop Kansas City in this game. I really think that this can be a blowout game for the first time in a while for Kansas City if the momentum is in our corner. And like you said, if there's some things in shambles with the quarterback position with Denver, this can really be a runaway game for Kansas City. And then,
absolutely.
Hey, keep in mind, this is in Arrowhead as well.
Yeah, and their defense is, I don't want to say is porous. I mean, they definitely got some talent there, but they didn't do enough this offseason to truly bolster it to the point that they're going to be able to contend with our offense.
Right. And, but in the same respect, I think Derek Wolfe is still a decent player with Bradley Chubb, to complement Von Miller. Chris Harris is getting old. Here's my thing is, even if their front seven has a great game, we're going to torch their defensive secondary.
No, absolutely. Other than Harris, the only other guy that they have on their roster, at least looking at it, they got a lot of young guys, is Kareem Jackson. But Kareem Jackson is 31, possibly at this point in the season when we play them, 32. I mean, the guy is not who he once was.
Right. And I'm going to flip over to the offense here just for a second. Phillip Lindsay is a great running back. But Phillip Lindsay cannot be a great running back against probably the fastest defense in the NFL. That's just not possible. And then Joe Flacco with his old legs, he's not a quarterback who can move around anymore. I feel like they're going to have a lot of trouble against Kansas City. And then they have Courtland Sutton at wide receiver as well. Look, they have some talent. They do. It's decent, but it's not even San Diego Chargers talent.
No, absolutely. And they do have talent, but what's going to be their downfall is going to be their offensive line. Our D-line, our linebackers are going to be able to blitz Flacco, Locke, whoever's back there, and put a tremendous pressure on them. And I don't really see anybody on their offensive line roster right now who can do much of anything to stop this rushing attack that we're going to have.
I think that you're right. I think that Spags this could potentially be a team that Spags will just send them after the quarterback all game long.
Oh, yeah. I mean, ears back, just get at it and get them.
Yep, and I completely agree with you. So with that being said, look, if it wasn't for our defense and how much it stepped up, I would say that this would be a 31-24 score in favor of Kansas City. But with our defense and the way that we have transformed this defense into top 10, I'm going to say that we're going to wax Denver at home 42-17 and send us to 14-1 on the season.
Wow, Richard, I was actually in the exact same ballpark. I have 45-17.
See, great minds think alike, and you know, we both have the GM mindset. We break down both teams here, and it just, you can't keep up with Patty and Mahomes, number one. You can't keep up with Tyreek Hill, and then we have the Honey Badger and Frank Clark. I'm sorry, plus all the other weapons. This is just, it's going to be hard to find a team that legitly stacks up against the Kansas City Chiefs in any way, shape, or form. And I feel like that's legitimately why we only have one loss on the season between both of us here throughout the season preview, which is getting ready to head into the playoffs here. So, okay, you told me yours, and do you think we have obviously locked home field advantage at this point in the season? Would you say that the Patriots are the number 2 team, or do you think there's another team that's going to come out of nowhere to be the second seed in the AFC?
I think that, philosophically speaking, the Patriots, as long as they make the playoffs, they are considered the number 2 team.
Right.
They're just a very different team when the playoffs come into the picture.
Right.
And I think that Patriots are definitely going to be on everybody's radar. I would even I would mark a big target on them right now, as whether it be the regular season game, the playoffs, they are the people that we are going to be going after and trying to destroy. Because at some point, we have to make a statement game. Yes. Or a statement win.
Yes.
And I don't want it to be in the regular season. I want it to be in the playoffs when things truly matter. Going into their game when we are 12-1, 11-1, whatever it is, that doesn't matter. We're already in the playoffs.
Right.
And at that point, knowing how Andy Reid works, he's not going to show them anything that they're going to see in the playoffs. It's going to be a very different game. Same thing with Belichick. He does the same thing.
Yes.
And so I want to win that one that matters in the playoffs, because that's when everyone is giving their all. The coaches, the players, the water boys, everyone's going to be giving their all. That's the win that I want.
Yep, we want the one that counts, and we've waited long enough, Kansas City, and I feel like this is the year that we are going to do it. And if it's going to be done, we have to cut back on the injuries. And with that being said, we're going to talk about the injury report here in training camp, and we'll start off with Tyreek Hill with that quad injury. When it was reported, it was made out to be more than what it truly was. Let's talk about that for a second. Chris, what's your take on Tyreek Hill, and how fast will he come back from this quad injury?
Depending on how deep the quad bruise is, it could be a couple days. I know that he was held out yesterday, out of practice. It's going to kind of depend on how deep it is. I haven't heard anything as far as like how severe the bruise is.
Right.
But especially for a guy who's all about running, that quad bruise can really mess all of that up.
Oh yes.
And it's better to err on the side of caution rather than force him back.
Yes, there's no reason to force a player like Tyreek Hill back right now. He's not trying to make a roster spot, obviously. I feel like the smartest thing to do is let him sit back and heal up from this, because it's not a big injury. But if you go out and you strain that again, you know, it can turn into a bigger injury. So Jordan Lucas also had a hamstring issue. Running back Damian Williams, hamstring as well. Right tackle Mitchell Schwartz, back spasms. Darius Harris also out with injuries, and Tim Ward as well. And none of these are major injuries besides the Keath-Reiser, and I feel like he's going to be moved from the injury list to the physically unable to perform, or the IR list. So I think that we're okay here with the injury report. I think that the way things are stacking up, we'll be ready for preseason game 1 against the Bengals. And do you have anything to add to tonight's show, Chris? Because we are just about out of time.
No, just that all these injuries are extremely minor, and there's no, other than Reiser, there's nothing to really worry about as far as a long injury or anything like nagging.
Yes, we are going into the season a strong, healthy team, and we couldn't ask for a better scenario. So, Chris, I really enjoyed having you on the show tonight. I appreciate that, as always. It's great catching up with you. It seems like it's been a while, and I really appreciate your football knowledge, as always.
Likewise, it was great to be back, man.
Hey, perfect. Kansas City, that is our show this evening. We will be back on here sooner than later. More shows will be coming as the Chiefs pick up pace as well. We have a lot to look forward to. Preseason game 1 against the Bengals is coming up here soon, and I look forward to the season. It actually kicked off this evening. I wish I had a score for you, but I did not tune in to the Hall of Fame game tonight. But Kansas City, please subscribe, like, check out Kansas City Sports Update on Facebook. Go to Kansas City Sports Update, and then go check out our phone app as well. We got a lot of big things going on, and we really like the community support. Please subscribe, like, enjoy, share, tell everybody about this broadcast, because that is the only way that you all can catch Kingdom Radio. Have a great night, Kansas City.
From the Kansas City Sports Update Studios, welcome to Kingdom Radio, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. Brought to you by Arrowhead-update. Join Chris and Richard on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Player FM, CastBox, and all third-party applications. Check us out on Facebook platforms such as Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead-update. And if you cannot find us there, Google or search Kingdom Radio and Kansas City Chiefs, and you will find us. Welcome to the Kingdom.